So late on Saturday night, the reports started coming out from the Syrian government agency that there had been these attacks with some sort of gas. Residents there were in the area in Aleppo city were reporting a noxious smell, and over 100 people rushed to hospital complaining of breathing difficulties and eye inflammation. These are different symptoms that doctors say are linked to the use of chlorine. Now, chlorine can be used as a chemical weapon, but it can also be held for residential uses. But it seems like that is the most likely thing to have been used. And there have been varying reports from different areas here. The Russian government saying 46 people were injured, Syrian government saying over 100 people were injured, but no deaths. People were being released overnight on Saturday night. However, the Syrian government determined that this certainly was rebels who carried out these attacks with some sort of gas. And on Sunday, yesterday, there were these attacks, the first airstrikes by the Russian government against this area since this ceasefire in September. They say they targeted exactly the areas held by rebels in Idlib where these shells came from, but we have no confirmation of how many casualties in those rebel areas yet as a result of the strikes.
But Leila, these airstrikes, the first really, the truce had been violated, but not to such an extent, and it's in a region where we had been told that that's where so many of the displaced Syrians have had to run through, and that really it will be an unmitigated disaster if that flares up again, which it looks like it can only do from here.
Yes, well, this is the concern. Different rebel and jihadist groups in the area saying this is a targeted attack by the government, saying that these attacks happened to try and break the ceasefire. Because the problem here has been that this ceasefire has held since September, but President Assad of Syria has always been very clear that he intends to retake the entire territory in the country. So it's not a permanent ceasefire. However, the Russians did warn the Turkish government, who they agreed this ceasefire with, before they went in with these airstrikes yesterday. So not entirely clear that they want the ceasefire to break just yet, whether or not the Syrian government does. But it's important to point out as well that the UN Chemical Weapons Monitor has said they have never found signs so far in the entire Syrian war of rebels using chemical weapons. So it's possible that this is a false flag and an attempt to try and break the ceasefire. At the moment, it doesn't seem that things are escalating yet, but there have been various instances of violence around the area. And so unfortunately, it does look like the ceasefire is fraying. If that's the case, about 3 million civilians living in that area who, again, will have nowhere else to go because the borders to both Turkey and Iraq are closed at the moment.
And indeed, Leila, the fighting is escalating elsewhere in Syria over the weekend.
Yes, we had huge amounts of fighting yesterday in the Euphrates Valley, which is where Kurdish-led US-backed militias are still fighting against the remnants of Islamic State. That's on the Iraqi border. There have been lots of back-and-forth skirmishes. The SDF, which is that Kurdish-led alliance, has won back some territory, but a lot of deaths this weekend. 79 SDF fighters, about 30 civilians, and 55 Islamic State fighters. Also lots of hostages taken by the Islamic State there, 30 Kurdish fighter hostages, and they had some more gruesome beheading videos taking place over the weekend. So there's been a lot of thought that Islamic State is down and out in the area, but they still are fighting quite strongly in this area of the Euphrates Valley on the Iraqi border. And we also had shelling in Idlib as well, which is in that ceasefire area, where 2 women and 7 children were killed by regime shelling. So it does seem that the violence is starting up again. Whether that continues or this was an isolated incident, an isolated weekend full of violence is unclear as yet.